Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Steven Goes to the Movies. Today I went and saw Mortal Engines, a new movie from a cast I didn't recognize, with a director I've never heard of, and loosely connected to Peter Jackson. At least they made it seem like he was a big part of this in all the promo materials and on the radio and in the theater and so forth. But I'm curious how much of a role he actually played in the production of this film. And it's a lot. I think it's a lot is the best way to describe this. If I were to call it anything, it would be Waterworld on land. Would be, I think, a great way to describe this film. Where to start? It begins with some heavy exposition about how hundreds of years earlier the world went to war, and 60 seconds later the war was over, because all the major countries had developed weaponry called the Medusa, which was fusion-based doomsday weaponry, I guess would be the way to describe it. And so 60 seconds later, the world has been annihilated, and those who survived can't live on the land itself anymore, I guess because the fusion weaponry also irradiated everything. Or, I mean, they don't explain that, but basically they can't live on the land anymore, so they develop huge engines that they then move. They build their towns above these engines that they then drive across the land in search of more resources. You have small towns and villages that are like mining towns and trading towns and stuff like that, where, you know, the mining town goes and mines a mountain for resources, and then they take it to the trading town where they sell the resources. At the same time, you then also have major cities like London, which is the one that this movie is based around, where it's so huge that they can't sustain themselves, so they basically turn into what they call predator cities, where they gobble up smaller cities and they steal the resources, essentially. The trailers made it seem more like a vicious process where they attack and eat up and destroy like the towns and the people and everything else. But what you actually find in the movie is they're kind of almost liberating these people, you could say, where the front of their city opens up. They bring in this smaller city, and then they have all the people depart from the city. They have them turn over their weapons, and that kind of thing. And then once everyone's done and they say, we will provide you food, shelter, and jobs, then they basically tear apart this town, and they utilize it as fuel in their engine. They say how they had spent most of their time in the West, in North America, because there's a land bridge. And we almost, it's funny because then it's kind of like the West and this town of London are like the colonizers once again, and then what we find out is the East is like, you know, the last bastion of freedom or whatever, and that's like what they have to defend from the West. So it's West versus East, as always, in everything. But yeah, so we start out with Hester, the female protagonist, Hester Shaw. She wants to kill the antagonist, and she fails because of another character named Tom. I know his name's Tom because Hester Shaw shouts the name Tom like 800 times in the movie, Tom, 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 Tom. My God, I was just like, shut up. It's like, we know you know his name, we get it. But so he stops her, but then she tells him about how the other guy murdered the mom, so he gets pushed off the city as well. And then it's now Tom and Hester together trying to survive, and they go through all these things. They end up in like a slave, like almost being sold as slaves, and then we had the Chinese character finally introduced. She'd been shown off in the trailers and everything else, and yeah, you know, her introductory scene, she's like a badass with guns and knives and swords and kung fu and all that stuff, but the acting was so wooden pretty much throughout the entire rest of the movie, any scene that she was in, except her like final confrontation scene that I don't want to spoil. Now they're in a floating craft and they go to like a floating city, and in the meantime there's this like other demonic creature that's chasing them because of a history with Hester Shaw, and then you learn about that more later in the movie, which again I don't want to spoil. But do I recommend this? It's a tough question. The movie is getting murdered on Rotten Tomatoes and with fans. I think Google said it had about a 48% with fans and like a 26 or 7% with critics, and I can see why. I mean, listen, for the most part, it's fairly visually stunning, I guess. You know, Peter Jackson did a whole thing about you have to see this movie in IMAX because it's a big movie and it needs the biggest screens. And I went and saw it in Dolby, in the Dolby theater, which is supposed to have like the blackest blacks and the surround sound. And none of it, I mean, it didn't seem like it needed it or utilized it. Just for one example, the first scene of the movie, which is Hester Shaw with like looking in the distance for something, and she's got like a spyglass, and it was like out of focus. The spyglass, like, I get it's glass and it's probably dirty, so it's kind of murky and muddy, but the first visual of the movie shouldn't be kind of like muted and ugly and foggy, especially when they're trying to make this whole big, you know, grand thing. Some of the acting that went with some of the cinematography just felt out of place and campy when everything else is being serious. Like, you know, they'll pan on a character, like when we're first introduced to a new character, before any words are said, it like cuts to their face and they make like a thing, and then music plays and then they speak, but I don't know who you are yet, so why do I care? Like, oh, you're a big deal, I guess. You know, they tried to get us emotionally invested in a bunch of side characters later as the movie went on, that they didn't spend enough time developing them enough for me to care. Even this monster thing that's chasing them, the whole thing that I don't want to spoil, that comes to a conclusion that I felt could have been more impactful had they, I think, spent more time properly developing it, versus just like, this happened and this happened and this happened, now we're over here and this and this and this and blah blah blah. You know, there's just so many things going on that it was really hard to like get into any one part of it. So would I say go see it in IMAX? Dolby, no. You know, if you have one of the monthly plans, if you got Movie Pass, AMC Stubs List, Cinemia, anything like that, you know, I mean, you could do worse. Then again, there is Aquaman coming up soon. I'm seeing that tomorrow, as well as the Spider-Man, which also came out today. So like, if you've got Cinemia and you get 2 movies a month, I wouldn't say to use this on that. Or if you got Movie Pass with 3 movies a month, I wouldn't say do that either. This isn't worth it. I would definitely recommend going and seeing Spider-Man instead today or this weekend. See it twice. I might see it again because it was just so much fun. But thank you for watching. If you've gotten to this point, let me know your thoughts. If you've seen it or you want to see it or anything else you've seen or that you recommend I go see in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. That would be much appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow when I am seeing both Vox Lux and Aquaman. I got a big day tomorrow, so have a good night.